Word, I'm gonna say the word.
In the beginning was the Word.
Word.
Was the Word.
From the studios of KJZZ in Phoenix, Arizona, welcome to Word, a podcast about literature. Here's your host, Tom Maxedon.
Coming up on this episode of Word, we'll take a heady journey into the art of the possible.
My mother passed, and I thought if there's ever a moment when I can actually take time to get off the hamster wheel for a while, this would be the moment.
Plus, we celebrate some Indigenous young poets who are keeping their culture alive and telling stories in new ways.
Navajos are matrilineal and matriarchal. Poetry gave me a vehicle to sit down and be like, what was so important to me?
First up, Amber McCrary is a Diné poet and returning guest who joined us in April 2021 as part of National Poetry Month. She read her poem titled Grass God from her collection Electric Desert, published the year prior. Here's a backtrack of that poem.
O loins of desert sun, I wait in my village for no one, but here you are, my cloud of summer, my maize god of prickly pollen, paths, seize me. You cousins of grass, wit of luck, container of kernel, obsessor of history, sex of stalk, raise your corn silk, let it down, be my companion plant. I wilt for no one, except for your leaves to hold. Shade me on the driest of days, and I will keep your home unpaved. From unrelenting teeth, sorrow's secretion hollows your home. Hair of saguaro seeds, my moon desert solstice, backbone of my tongue, rain house of my heart, swim in the glitter sand waves.
Since then, she's moved from the East Valley to northern Arizona, where she's been co-leading literary workshops, among many other things. McCrary is also working on a new collection of her own poems, as well as imprints from Abalone Mountain Press, which she founded.
Our most recent title is called My Body is an Ill-Fitting Costume, and it's by a Diné poet named Rachel Johnson, and it explores the poet's her journey with being a disabled poet, having a disabled body, and navigating through kind of an ableist world, and also coming from the reservation. And there's also a few poems surrounding her experiences growing up that deal with trauma and some abuse. But it's such a beautiful collection, and Rachel is an amazing poet. She's based out of New Mexico, and she's currently working on a memoir right now.
What's been going on with you otherwise since last time we talked?
Oh, a lot. Finishing my collection of poems, and that's going through a press right now in the reading period. Coming out with Rachel's chapbook. And then also, this is like my passion project, is doing workshops with Shayna Nez. She's a Diné professor out of Diné College. And so far, this will be our third workshop through AZ Humanities, and it's funded through the National Endowment. And we're just kind of having fun working together, bringing out free Diné reader books to our workshops and free lunch. And this is our last workshop of the year. We just kind of talk about what is our relationship to the land, and we read some poems together. And next year, we'll be continuing this workshop series, but we'll be going back to the res, and we'll be doing one workshop in Kayenta, another in Palaca, which I'm really excited about, on the Hopi res. And then our last workshop out of this series will be in Holbrook. And we're hoping to work with the Holbrook High dorm students, because Shayna Nez, the person that I'm co-teaching these workshops with, she went to the Holbrook High dorm when she was a high school student.
It sounds like a lot of fun, and that'll be November 18th from 11 to 1:30 at the Flagstaff Public Library. I'm assuming there's no cost for folks that are interested?
Nope, no cost. And Just come by, get a free copy of the Diné Reader, some lunch, and we'll write some poems, talk about some poems.
Yeah, I like the interactive aspect. I mean, it's one thing, obviously, to go to readings, and that's great, but this kind of guided approach for actually writing is, I think, often better in terms of what sticks with people. Not to take anything away, of course, from author appearances and things like that, but what has been maybe something that you have learned or been surprised about or just really enjoy by doing these workshops?
I noticed it's a bit more of a challenge, I think, to get folks on the res to come to the workshops. I'm always
Sure.
nervous because there's only like one or two people, like the first 10 minutes. But then people start coming in and we'll have up to 10 people. And just hearing their stories, since it's interactive, like I really cherish everyone's feedback so far. And like I've learned so much from some of their stories that they've told us about some of the poems that we read and how they kind of have like their own stories and knowledge from their grandparents that they've heard. And so it brings something new to the table that I've never heard before, in addition to these poems. And I just really value a lot of the stories that we've had coming from the workshops.
Amber McCrary is owner of Abalone Mountain Press and also a Diné poet, among many other things, an artist as well. Amber, thanks so much for coming back to Word and talking to us.
Thanks, Tom.
You can find out a bit more about Amber McCrary and the writing workshop at Flagstaff Public Library on our website, word.kjzz.org. Coming up, we'll take a heady journey into the art of the possible. I'm Tom Maxedon, and you're listening to Word, a KJZZ podcast about literature.
Whether your business is new or deeply rooted, large or small, you can share what's great about it while supporting a vital community service, KJZZ. It's a fact that listeners trust and support companies that sponsor KJZZ, and by becoming a sponsor, you build a stronger connection to everyone in your community. Get connected today at sponsorkjzz.org.
Hey, it's Tiara. On All Things Considered from KJZZ News and NPR, we hit pause on the news cycle for you so you can get a handle on what you need to know and why it matters. Listen every afternoon from 3 until 6, on air, online, and on your phone.
You're a texting, emailing, tweeting extraordinaire. You and your cell phone are inseparable. It's the first thing you grab in the morning and the last thing you see before bed. Tap your screen and download the KJZZ mobile app. You can listen live and multitask. Tap the KJZZ app and stay connected. It's at your app store.
Welcome back to Word. I'm Tom Maxedon. Harper St. Clair has a heady new novel called Itch, The Art of Possibility. The book deals with uncovering the unexpected when a new series of metaphysical challenges comes into view, according to St. Clair's author website. She's from Arizona, and when we caught up recently, we began by discussing how the book came into being.
I've never had the time to really write outside my day jobs. They've been very demanding and they kind of, suck the life out of you. So on your day off, you're doing more recuperation than you are creation. I've studied my entire life the arts, and I love character development and plots and twists and art and creation and books and film. I got both my degrees from the University of Notre Dame, and I just never had the chance, or I'd say the golden opportunity to write outside my day job. But my mother passed, and I thought if there's ever a moment when I can actually take time to get off the hamster wheel for a while, this would be the moment. So she always told me, you should write books. I decided to get to know the characters I'd only met in my head. And lo and behold, they were a lot more interesting than the people I was working with.
Well, I'm glad you talked a little bit about that because, of course, it's National Novel Writing Month, and people have all kinds of ways of getting into stories. Beyond that, what was the inspiration for this novel? Because it's pretty heady, and it's about a topic that I have to be honest, when I first saw the subtitle, I thought, is this a self-help book? It's actually a work of fiction.
Yeah, it's all fiction. The characters are a little bizarre, but so intriguing and I think provocative. The inspiration for the book, I think, came from something deep inside me that I had, devoted my entire life to pursuing success and being efficient and hopefully applying my talent in my professional career. And I have a family and a great husband, but I always seem to have to put my career ahead of everything else in order to stay on top. And all of the people that I knew were kind of in the same boat. And I think that unfortunately, we're all consumed in our very, very busy realities, just making things work and making ends meet day to day. And I finally, when I had a little bit of personal reprieve, I realized, wait a minute, success is not fulfillment. Success is a worthwhile goal. And of course, you want to be good at what you do and you want to put your best work out there. But fulfillment comes from an entirely different investment. So as I wrote the characters, they actually became another source of inspiration for me. And they started creatively expressing what I guess I needed to face more directly. The more practical inspiration for the novel was me wanting to express that the two demanding realities that we're unfortunately all slaves to are ultimately our personal loss and demise. And that ends up being the main character, Mitch's real personal dilemma. So I think the inspiration kind of came a little bit as a confessional and a culmination of life experiences,
Sure.
That all kind of come together and make you wake up and smell the coffee.
The book is called Itch, subtitled The Art of Possibility, and that was why it struck me as this is a self-help book. And just listening to you right now, I think it kind of is, but not, of course, in the traditional sense of what we think of that genre.
Right.
But the book does center on Mitch, as you said. Tell us about him briefly.
Yes, I love the guy because he's us, he's most of us. He's thriving. He's good at what he does. He cares about his profession and his life. But at 42, he's never been in love. He's had, lots of love interests, but he's never fallen madly in love. And he's still in the process of rationalizing that that's okay because he's got all these other fabulous distractions in the world. And his clientele keeps him jumping day and night. He curates and finds treasures and finds artworks and for people that can spend millions on artifacts. His best friend is a Middle Eastern crown prince, and they met at Princeton. They have huge cultural and religious differences, but despite that, they have this undying commitment to each other because they share an aesthetic. They share this love of art and truth and beauty, and they're both compelled by it. And so they, this has drawn them together, and they've been friends since their college years. But what happens is they both go their separate ways, and Mitch gets into, his curating and acquisition world and his design shtick. And the prince is busy getting back into the groove of the Middle East. And all of a sudden, by happenstance, their worlds collide again. And, Mitch has always sourced things for the prince. He goes by the moniker Prince, but they haven't been that intimately close as male to male friends. And Tom, I think that's where the novel also is very different from regular fiction books. So much of today's fiction explores like romantic relationships. And although Mitch does have an ingenue in the story that, ends up taking center stage, the book is really more about delving into the male to male friendships between Prince and Mitch, and also Mitch's Italian godfather, who's kind of a Merlin-like character in the story, was back in the day a famous Italian architect and kind of trained Mitch on the nuances of the aesthetics.
And speaking of wizardry, there's an oracle that's featured, and is that where this plot twist really turns the book in a different direction?
Yeah, thank you. There is an oracle because some of Mitch's friends realize that he's lacking in the personal department, and he kind of has a microchip missing on the personal side. So they refer him to this very storied tea leaf reader in Greece. And so on one of his sourcing journeys, he stops off and he thinks, oh, this will be fun. And she ends up rocking his world, foretelling of this huge, soulful opportunity that he will be exposed to, and he has a choice to either get on the path or just deny it like he does everything else. But she told him, if you don't take this chance, something this big will never happen for you again in the soul department. And that, we all have lots of opportunities in our lives, but everybody has one huge one. And when it knocks, you got to be ready.
The book is called Itch, The Art of Possibility by Harper St. Clair. Thank you so much for coming to Word.
Thank you, Tom Maxedon, for all you do.
You can find out a bit more about Harper St. Clair on our website, word.kjzz.org. Coming up, we celebrate another Indigenous young poet who's writing to keep her culture alive. I'm Tom Maxedon, and you're listening to Word, a KJZZ podcast about literature.
Have you heard about Classical Next? KBOX Classical Next is highlighting the most talented young musicians in our community. Does your student sing, play piano, or perform in an ensemble? Are they between the ages of 7 and 13? Nominate them now for Classical Next at kboc.org.
So what do you want to do this weekend? Maybe get some help from KJZZ's Hotspots. It's a weekly text with some of the best ideas for what to do this weekend, curated by KJZZ. Whether you're an introvert, an extrovert, or feeling a bit wild, we've got you covered. So sign up at hotspots.kjzz.org.
You can get a lot of things delivered these days, and now that includes the latest Arizona news from KJZZ's Sun Up podcast. I'm Phil Latzman. Everything you need to know to start each day delivered to you in this handy little podcast. Go to kjzz.org or wherever you get your podcasts and download KJZZ's Sun Up today.
Welcome back to Word. I'm Tom Maxedon. Our final guest is Diné poet and author Kinsale Drake. Earlier this month, she moderated a panel with 3 other Indigenous authors for AZ Humanities. She also has a forthcoming collection of poems in 2024. When we spoke recently, Drake opened up about the catalyst for sharing her work publicly.
I didn't start sharing my work publicly until my Masane passed away, and that was about when I was in high school, and I didn't have many examples of Native peoples writing poetry about loved ones or grief, and specifically as a Navajo woman, it's really interesting to navigate that because death has taboos in some of our communities, and we have to navigate how to talk respectfully about people. And I think that's just, a normal human practice that should be navigated with care. And so really the poetry was coming from a place of grief, but also care and love, and trying to figure out how I could talk about this person who had a huge impact on my life. That's my maternal grandmother, and obviously on who I am as a person, because Navajos are matrilineal and matriarchal in structure. And poetry gave me a vehicle to sit down and be like, okay, what exactly do I remember from my childhood? What was so important to me? Who is this person to me? And what is the relationship that we can have through poetry now that they've passed on?
There's obviously such a rich tradition of oral storytelling in Indigenous communities. Are there conflicts that you've experienced, or maybe sometimes dealing with your elders, not understanding why you want to commit the storytelling that's inside you onto a page?
I think for me, storytelling has been a universal language when talking about writing, even with elders. I think telling stories is really important to who we are, and it's important to communicate with elders in our communities that it's important to let youth have a platform and let youth also, sit in and tell stories. I think it's more of a symptom of patriarchal values and colonialism that youth often feel silenced, especially young Native women and young Natives in general. I'm happy that I can be a role model in some way for youth who are looking to find a way to express themselves and locate that voice that they do have that is valuable to their community. I think a lot of us also hear from elders and tribal leaders, youth need to speak up, and and the thing is, I feel like there's no youth who have any lack of voice. I just think it's a matter of empowering those voices and giving them the tools to develop what they do want to say, to have people listen to them.
You're currently an editor. Also, you're the director of Indian Girls Book Club, and that's the letters NDN, in case folks are looking that up. Can you tell us more about those efforts?
Yeah, Indian Girls Book Club is it's my baby. It's an organization that I wish I had as a little girl, is usually how I like to explain it. But we do several things. We teach free workshops online and in person to Native youth. We have a youth coordinator who does poetry workshops every month, and their name is Pate Sanwi. They're from Pine Ridge, South Dakota. My friend Lily Painter does the wonderful graphics for us and helps to center us in Kiowa storytelling and basically showing that storytelling has always been a part of our communities. So we do education for a lot of it, but we also send free books out to tribal libraries, to reading groups. We send care packages out. We promote Indigenous authors on every level. We work directly with big and small publishing presses, and we do in-person events with Native-run publishing houses like Abalone Mountain Press. And as an editor, I have had experience working with literary magazines and big publishing presses. And part of Indian Girls Book Club's mission came from what I felt like those entities were lacking in. The Native peoples are about, I think they're still less than 1% of the publishing world in terms of representation and authors. And that's not even close to, I think, how we would want to see ourselves represented in media, especially young people like myself, at one point looking for some kind of representation, looking for some way to articulate grief and all these complex emotions through young people's literature. We're looking to increase that representation.
Well, finally, I want to talk about your collection of poetry, The Sky Was Once a Dark Blanket, and that won the 2023 National Poetry Series, right? Is it out in print yet?
No, it'll be out in less than a year, though, which is very exciting. It should be forthcoming September 2024.
I was talking with another author about just how long it takes for things to actually get to print. And she was telling me particularly the academic publishing houses take the longest. Can you tell us more about the content, how these poems maybe are interconnected, or is there a running theme, for instance?
Yeah, so the book itself, The Sky Was Once a Dark Blanket, the title comes from a poem that I'd published called Creation Story Blues, and it spans the southwestern U.S. from the desert to the cities and the relationships between the people in those cities and people of the land to the earth. There's this quote by Tommy Orange, which I think drove a lot of the collection, which was, an urban native belongs to the city and a city belongs to the earth. And so there's just this notion of connection and kinship, no matter where you go, and an awareness of that as a native person, even if you are living in a city like I am currently. But I also am fascinated. I mean, I wanted to be a marine biologist when I was a kid. And as we know, the Southwest used to be this huge ocean.
Yeah,
so
right.
I'm fascinated by living things and the oceanscape that it once was. And now that it's like a desertscape, like the complete opposite, what are the tensions there? And this notion that all contradictions can find a home somewhere. It doesn't have to be one thing or the other, but we can hold all these things past a sort of lineality or singular time frame.
Kinsale Drake is a poet, editor, playwright, and her work has appeared in numerous places. I want to thank you so much for talking to us. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ahiahet, for having me.
You can find out a bit more about Kinsale Drake on our website, word.kjzz.org. We'd like to congratulate Nadia Mirza, who won our literary costume contest. She dressed up as Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games, and her mom, Kathleen, says her daughter was inspired to create her own costume, picking out all the materials, making the shirt, and patterned her costume after the book, not the movie. Thanks so much for all who entered the contest. You can see the costume on our website or KJZZ social media. We're back with another episode on November 28th. You can find our shows on multiple platforms, including the NPR pod feed and now YouTube. I'm Tom Maxedon, and thanks so much for listening to Word.
Word.
Word. Word.
Was the word.
Thanks for listening to Word, a KJZZ podcast about literature. You can find all episodes online at word.kjzz.org or wherever you get your podcasts.